Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Richard III, and we are in what the folio calls Act 4, Scene 3, what other versions call Act 4, Scene 4, because other versions split up, Act 4, Scene 2, because, the passage of time, all that sort of thing. Richard is now king. He has had Lady Anne killed because he now intends to marry King Edward's daughter, Elizabeth, now that King Edward's sons, Edward and Richard, have been killed by guys that Tyrell hired, and Tyrell is kind of, regretting that or whatever. He's also had Clarence's children. He just sent the son away to Nowheresville, and he had the daughter marry somebody of very low birth, so there's no way that she will ever take the throne. And these are the ducks that he's putting in a row so that he can stay on the throne. Meanwhile, a bunch of people are going to join Richmond, who would be the heir to the throne if the Lancasters were ahead in the War of the Roses, Lancasters versus Yorks. But they're not, so the Yorks are, and Richmond is just elsewhere. But other people are going to join Richmond, notably Dorset, and as of yesterday, Buckingham, because Buckingham hesitated about killing Princes Edward and Richard. So the new King Richard no longer trusts him, but fearing for his life, Buckingham ran away. So in this particular scene, Act 4, Scene 3, as it's known in folio, we get to check in with the ladies again. And Queen Margaret has come back, and she says that, she's just been sort of hanging out, watching all of the things happen. And then Queen Elizabeth, remember, who was Henry VI's wife, and the Duchess of York, who is the mother to the former King Edward, to George, otherwise known as Clarence, and also to Richard. They come in and they're like, oh, woe is us that these two boys have now died. Like, all of these people around us are dying, and all these things are happening to our children, and this is horrible. And can anybody express more grief than us? Does anyone have more right to grief than us? And the whole time that they're saying this, like, they're having their little back and forth, like, oh, my kids are dead, oh, my kids are dead, kind of a thing. Queen Margaret is standing off to the side, and she's interjecting just like the snide little things, because remember, she's bitter that nobody stood up for her when her husband and son were killed, and nobody tried to defend them. So she had laid all these curses, and a lot of people who were cursed by her have died in the play. So Elizabeth and the Duchess of York are like, who could possibly have more grief than us? And then Margaret comes out and she's like, hello, remember me, who also lost everyone? And these are also still kind of my losses that are going on here, because this is still my family that's falling apart. This is me. So you want to take a tally? Okay, I had an Edward, and Richard killed him. I had a Henry, and Richard killed him. You had an Edward, and Richard killed him. And you had a Richard, and Richard killed him. And they're like, yeah, and I also had somebody, and you killed him. And I had a Rutland, and you killed him. And Queen Margaret says, thou hadst a Clarence too, and Richard killed him. From forth the kennel of thy womb hath crept a hellhound that doth hunt us all to death. That dog that had his teeth before his eyes to worry lambs and lap their gentle blood. That foul defacer of God's handiwork that reigns in galled eyes of weeping souls. That excellent grand tyrant of the earth. Thy womb let loose to chase us to our graves. O upright, just, and true disposing God, how do I thank thee that this carnal cur preys on the issue of his mother's body and makes her pew fellow with others moan. So this is directed primarily at the Duchess of York because she's Richard's mother. And Margaret is like, but this is your kid that's been doing all of this killing. Your kid. Had it not been for you, none of this would have happened. And then she's like, God, isn't this... I should be taking joy in the fact that this horrible, deformed thing that doesn't even qualify as a person is now making his own mother's life miserable. So it's not just me that gets to be miserable. And the Duchess of York is like, whoa, that's a little harsh. And Margaret has more to say, and we will hear that more tomorrow, because Yeah, it's a long one. We'll get into that then.